Parents of missing children who have been found again. What's the story? What was life like after they were found? Has your child changed if at all? Serious. I'm not sure if this counts. My babysitter kidnapped me when I was less than a year old. She dressed me up and took a picture of me on a Polaroid. My mom got me back the same day. I'm not 100% sure of the details because she doesn't like talking about it. She did keep the picture though to remember the terrible experience. I don't recall anything though. Late 70s San Diego. No mobile phones, etc. I walked to and from school in the first grade and hated it. I don't remember how long of a walk it was, but I do remember having to go over a bridge and through another neighborhood. So it's conceivable it was a little under a mile. Anyway, one day after school I decide, frick it, my mom can come and pick me up. My dad was in the Navy and his ship was in port. I stayed on the playground. It's getting darker. It's night and I'm just swinging and sliding on the playground. All of a sudden some cop cars pull up and my dad jumps out and is screaming Rogers and Clark. Rogers and Clark, it was inhuman. The yell was echoing off of the brick school walls. I knew I was in for it. I walked up to the cop cars as casually as possible with a hey what's up attitude, and before I can say anything my dad is full on spanking me with the cops watching and shaking their heads. Cut to riding home in the cop car with my dad. We get back home and my mom is huddled in the corner of a room crying, screaming and yelling my baby. My baby, just even thinking about it now my eyes are welling up. Worst decision ever. Dang. Not for nothing, but that seems like quite a far distance for a 5-6-year-old to walk alone. When I was a kid I once went upstairs to watch TV, and unbeknownst to me, the whole neighborhood was in a frenzy running around looking for me. My dad came home from work to look for me at the pond. My mom was crying, and the neighbors were running around trying to help out in any way they could. It had been maybe 3 hours and I wondered, man, where is everybody? 6-year-old me decided to stay upstairs though, as I was chillin' watching TV. Eventually, my mom came in the house and just started yelling you space nipple. I waltzed on down the stairs like nothing had happened, and just kinda said, hey, sup. After that, my parents were a little more careful with where I was, and my mother was traumatized a little bit. I did something similar when I was younger. I used to sleep in the guest room instead of my own because it has a television. One night for whatever reason I decided to sleep in the closet of that room. My parents had a frantic morning. I put my parents through this twice. First time, I was 7. Mom was trying to be creative with punishment for me missing the bus too many times. Told me I had to walk to school, but planned to come get me after a few blocks. I went the wrong way, got lost. She had the police out looking for me for a few hours before I was found. Second time, I ran away when I was 12 after a really physically abusive episode with her. I wrote a note, stole her jewelry, took my Barbie sleeping bag and a box of Fruity Pebbles and bicycled about 5 miles from home. At this point we lived in the country, so I slept under a barn. I had plans to get on a train or bus and get a job at McDonald's. I also got picked up by the police that time, and then went to live with my uncle for a summer. I think the second time had a big impact on our family, because after that the physical abuse mostly stopped and my mom started taking serious medication. She feels really bad about it, but so do I. I can't imagine having your kid be gone for an entire night. Still, I understand why my 12-year-old self felt like I couldn't take it anymore. I was a missing teen. I ran away from the East Coast to California when I was 14. The FBI found me after a week. The 19-year-old I ran away to was charged with enticing a minor across state lines with sexual intent. I felt awful. We never had sex and he was just as much of a kid as I was. My parents said they would drop the charges if I refused to speak with him again, but I don't even know if that would have been possible. My family was a mess. I regret not calling to tell my mother that I was okay, and if I had it to do again I would. However, I don't regret running away. My father was an abusive butthole. It did not really get better when I was returned and my mother quite literally strangled me at one point. I do think that they were a bit better with my siblings though. I love my parents, but I never let my father forget that he was a crappy drunk abusive butthole, and any success I have accomplished is in spite of him and not because of him. My relationship with my mother was far more nuanced but just as unhealthy until I moved out. Apparently my mother was inconsolable and the entire neighborhood was out looking for me. There were news articles in the paper and on the television. The missing photo they picked was not flattering. My mom had a falling out with her church. All types of nonsense. I'm in my 30s now, but I will never be angry at 14-year-old me for trying to free herself from an abusive household. I know it was selfish, but I really thought I had no other way to end the abuse. I wasn't wrong. Hope things are better for you now. Girl I went to school with, who was actually the niece of my mom's best friend, went missing back in March. One night she was a passenger in a male friend's truck. They got pulled over and turns out that friend had a warrant for his arrest, so they asked her to drive the truck home. That was the last time she was seen. The truck was found about 4 hours north the next morning on the side of a country road. The seats had been ripped up by a knife. Her parents tried to report her missing, but turns out she also had a warrant for theft and the police failed to run her license that night. Therefore, if there's a warrant out for your arrest, they can't report you missing. People are constantly posting on her Facebook how worried they are about her, and her barely computer literate grandma keeps begging her to call. Apparently if you message her she reads it but doesn't reply. Her mother thinks someone has her phone. It's all around super eerie. I remember a kid and his mom that moved into our duplex complex, if that's the proper term, and his behavior was a little odd. He used to come out and play with us like a regular kid, but the way his mom treated him and the fact that I distinctly remember him saying my name is Adam now like he almost said a different name. They only lived there for a few months then they were gone. This was probably in 87 or 88 in Lorain, Ohio. I just remember how it set some kind of alarm off in my head, like it felt wrong, like they were hiding. My brother's friend ran away. Don't remember why, but he was found in a different city. He gave everyone a different story. He told the cops he was drugged and suddenly woke up somewhere else. He told his mom he was kidnapped. He told his dad he was selling drugs. He told my brother he owed money to some people. This happened when I was in 2nd grade and my brother was in 10th, so I don't remember a lot of the details. Holy crap, that's wild. My brother didn't run away, but he was missing for about an hour from a car ferry crossing the North Sea in April. My dad was in the US Army and we were taking a family vacation over spring break. Due to having a fairly large family, we camped rather than staying in hotels. My parents had planned for this, purchasing a brand new full-size Chevrolet van prior to us heading to Europe for 5 years. Anyway, this vacation took us up through Denmark, then on a ferry to Sweden, finally driving into Norway. I was in 9th grade, which would put my brother in 2nd grade. My dad had taken my 2 other sisters on a walking tour of the ferry. It was huge, while my mom camped out with brother and I in a lounge area. It's worth nothing that we're very much Americans. We'd collectively learned enough French and German to get along, but not even my half Norwegian mother spoke any Scandinavian language. While we were waiting for dad to come back, my brother announced he needed to use the facilities. We could see restrooms from where we were sitting, so mom made him promise to go there and come right back. She kept an eye on the doors, but was doing other things to pass the time as well. After 15 minutes, my brother hasn't returned. At the 30-minute mark, my dad and sisters were back, so he headed to the head. No brother. My mom can go from 0 to nuclear meltdown in approximately 2 seconds. So she's immediately convinced brother managed to sneak out of the bathroom, traverse several decks to one way you could get outside, and has fallen to his fate in the deep, cold waters. Somehow my dad manages to communicate with the staff well enough that they understand what has happened, and a ship-wide search begins. I know that several people checked the bathroom in addition to my dad. I could still see the door. No brother. A short time, or an eternity, later, guess who comes out of the bathroom? He'd gotten seasick while in there, passed out while puking, and somehow wedged his scrawny self behind the toilet fixture in such a way no one could see him. When he contemplated joining the Coast Guard after college, I promised I would tell this story at his commissioning. He chose the Army National Guard instead. When I was younger, a girl from our school went missing for several hours. Had the police looking for her, and the search was really ramping up when she was found, in her garden, in a suitcase that she had gotten into to read a book. That was a weird one. Jesus, I read in a garden in a suitcase and thought this story was about to take a horrible turn. This wasn't me, but one time my brother wasn't feeling well, so he was given a Tylenol and he fell asleep in our living room on the floor. I was unaware of it as I was distracted by doing my homework. My mom came in and asked me where he was and I thought he was still outside. Anyway, the whole street was going up and down and into their houses looking for him until I decided to get up and look around. Immediately found him in the living room. For some reason no one thought to check my house first. We were camping one time and my sister went missing. We searched the whole campground only to find her asleep in front of our truck. Freaking weirdo. My best friend went missing this summer about 2 weeks ago for 4 days. She ended up going to someone's house and just stayed because she didn't feel like going home. Everyone was so worried about her. I was interviewed by so many police and detectives, one of them thought I was lying and knew where she was because I was her best friend. Why wouldn't she tell me where she was? She didn't, and it was so frustrating. Her family was a wreck. They stayed up long hours waiting for her to come home and they were honestly just freaked out. When she came home nothing had changed. She was always a bit flighty and out there, but I feel like she doesn't regret anything about running away. I feel like she'd do it again if she could. She's also mad at me for all the information I have out to the detectives. I was just trying to do my best to bring her home and it's like she doesn't want to be home. Maybe there's some underlying reason, but she won't tell anyone why she did it, not even her family. She honestly became a butthole about everything. She wasn't never the nicest person, but she's just become so different. I wish I knew the whole story and how to help her. Honestly, I feel like you did the right thing. Hopefully you guys can reconnect and help her out. I don't like how empty this question is, so I'll leave my pseudo missing story. When I was a kid, I liked to be in cabinets, closets, etc. Small places appealed to me. They still do, to be honest. Well, one day, when I was about 4, I decided to have my nap under my bed. Adding to this, I crawled all the way under to get right up next to the wall. When my mom came to get me up, I wasn't where I should be, and I was dead asleep, so I didn't respond to her calling. Police were called. Everyone was freaked out. I woke up and crawled out, unaware of the chaos. My mom learned to check everywhere before freaking out. I had the same thing happen when I was a kid minus the police. They checked under the bed too, but I was small enough, and it was a cursory glance, so they didn't see me. My neighbor went missing when I was pretty young. She got involved with an older guy, was always sneaking out and running away. She was 18 at the time, not technically a missing child I guess, and by law they had to wait to put out a missing person report because she was an adult. The dad took matters into his own hands and tracked down credit card purchases and such. Finds out she bought a plane ticket to NC, so he calls up the airline and gets all the information. Went to the airport and tracked her down. He got his daughter right before she was about to get on a flight to NC to be sold into human trafficking. I was too young to remember everything, but it made my mom more strict about little things, and when I would ask why, she would say because that story is her biggest fear. That's a myth. You don't have to wait to report a missing person. Report right away, it can save a life. The first day or two is crucial. Since no one answers, here's my bit. I was missing for the better part of the day. I think I was 7 or 8 at the time. After school I had gone to a friend's house to play Sonic 3. Tried to call my mom, but I think no one picked up and I thought it'd be fine. This was pre-mobile phone. Did not realize at the time that phoning home did not only mean try to phone, but speak to someone on the phone. It was not. Apparently the police had been called and were sniffing around the neighborhood with dogs for me. When I got back my dad was furious with me. I had to come home early from work, threw my backpack at my face and beat me up for a while. Then I had to hand copy a newspaper issues for a week and didn't really talk with that friend anymore. Mum was pretty pissed at me, too. I guess all that didn't really improve the atmosphere at home. We hadn't talked much before and spoke less after that. My dad was furious with me. I had to come home early from work, threw my backpack at my face and beat me up for a while. What the frick, man? That's not okay. About 6 years ago, I got into an accident. Got run over by a bus going to a computer training. The bus driver took me to the closest hospital. I don't remember any of these. The bus driver came back 2 days after to check on me and told me what had happened. Wasn't anyone's fault. I was in a coma for a day. Came out the next day, very confused. It was my first time being admitted into the hospital and I was 16 at the time. My face was badly bashed so speaking was hard. So after waking up, I had to wait for the nurse to come see me to know I was awake. When she did, she ran to call the doctor. It was like something from a movie scene. Except in movie scenes, the nurse is there as soon as the guy wakes up. I was up for about an hour, just hoping someone would come around. The doctor came immediately and handed me my phone and told me to call my parents. This was about 8 AM. I called my mum and I could hear her so excited to hear my voice that she started crying on the phone. Apparently, she and my dad were just driving out to go search for me again. Spent just a week in the hospital, exactly 6 days before my graduation ceremony. Every year, my parents call me to tell me they love me. It's like my second birthday. They still did it about 4 weeks ago. They told me how distraught they were. They had searched everywhere. The police had told them they couldn't officially file a report until 2 days after I was found missing. They spent the whole night driving around looking for me, just driving, and they were going back to it the next day. They said they couldn't just stay home. I've always thought that the pain from the accident would never rival that of my parents who had thought the worst. I'm grateful I didn't die that day because they wouldn't even have been able to find my body for closure. This barely counts at all. But when I was a teenager, 14-15, I suspected my mom was going through all my things when I wasn't home. So one night I write in my diary about wanting to run away, and the next day I took my bike and rode it a few miles downtown. Not a big deal. I lived in a pretty small city, so I often rode my bike to shops and stuff, and to friends' houses. In fact, the only difference between this and a normal weekend day was that I'd written that hint in my diary. I even said I'm going for a ride when I left. Pretty standard. The police found me at the mall by 4 PM. Think they were pretty annoyed when it was clear from what I had on me. My backpack just had my wallet, some school assignments, and some comics I'd picked up that day, no clothes or food, that I had no intention of running away. Even so, the police escorted me home. My mom never admitted to reading my diary. She first insisted I never told her I was leaving, which still doesn't explain the cops. I left all the time without announcing it, then just reverted to "you were gone so long." I had a bad feeling. Are you sure it wasn't I don't respect my kids' privacy and got caught snooping, Mom? Geez, I hope it got better at some point. My little brother fell asleep behind the couch cushions when he was 2 years old. We think he was looking out the window of our living room and he dozed off and somehow rolled behind the cushions in a way where it completely concealed him. We spent like 3 hours trying to find him, turning the entire house upside down. Finally my mom goes to look out the window and sees his foot pop out from the couch. That day we learned my brother can sleep through just about any noise. Other story. When I was 14 I ran away. My home situation was pretty fricked. I went to stay at my friend's. It was after my mom and I had gotten into an insane argument where I called her out on being an alcoholic, neglecting her kids, and being extremely emotionally mentally abusive and manipulative to me. Anyway, I stayed at my friend's for over a week. My dad lived in a different state, and when he called me I refused to go home. I respect my dad more than anyone, but he didn't have a true picture of what my home life was like currently. 4 days in, I reached out to my brother on AIM, and my mom saw the message pop up. She responded and told me that it didn't matter if I came home because she planned on sending me away to boot camp military school anyway. My dad intervened at this point and essentially told my mom not to speak to me. He picked me up after about 9 days and I stayed with him for a few weeks while he tried to mend things with my mom. It never worked. Things went back to the way they were and my mom couldn't have cared less that I was gone. I was a good kid, never got so much as a lunch detention, but my mom was always threatened by my presence because I raised my younger brother and was very successful in academics. Once I moved away, our relationship slowly improved. I went through several years of therapy as an adult. A few years ago, we went on a walk and she broke down crying and apologized for putting me through heck growing up. She told me she wouldn't have survived if I hadn't been around, and she was too proud to admit it at the time. My co-worker's wife. It's not a good ending unfortunately. Her parents were druggies who left her with anyone. This guy offered to watch her but took her over state lines and abused her. She was 6 or 7 and apparently doesn't remember much and thankfully blocked out the worst parts. She was found and went to live with her aunt. She had a better life from then on. My daughter ran away when she was 5. She was mad at me about something, don't remember what. I asked her to sit in the kitchen while I was helping her brother but she decided to walk out the back door in her school uniform with no shoes. About 10 minutes after I had told her to go in the kitchen, we couldn't find her. We looked everywhere. I was hysterical. I called 911 and was so distraught the operator couldn't understand what I was saying. After finally getting the words out intelligibly, the operator said she just had a call coming from a cop who found a shoeless little girl wandering around. She was 3 blocks away. I ran those 3 blocks the fastest I have ever run, shoeless. The cop wouldn't let me touch her until I proved she was mine. Which is stupid because there weren't any other shoeless hysterical women barreling down a residential street yelling my daughter's name. Oh, and my daughter was desperately trying to come to me yelling mama but cop was holding her. She learned a big lesson that day, and so did I. Don't underestimate my daughter's temper. I think the cop did what he did to protect the kid. Poor guy doesn't know the kid nor you, so he does what he thinks is better. Protect the child as if it was his own. When I was younger, all 6 of my cousins and siblings and I were playing outside. My cousin, 4 years old, and I, 8 years old, got in a fight over who got to play with a new scooter at my grandma's house. Since I was bigger and older, I selfishly took it from her. She stormed off crying and went inside the house, but luckily none of the parents saw the fight happen, so I got on with my life. About 30 minutes later, I heard my aunt yell her name, followed by all the adults coming outside and asking where she was. She clearly wasn't outside playing with us, but I was the only one who saw her go in the house. Since I didn't want them to know I was mean to her, I said nothing and just shrugged. Well, 20 minutes later, no one could find her anywhere. I knew she was inside, but they had searched every room calling her name, so the adults thought she was outside somewhere. Cue chaos. For the next half hour or so, the adults knocked on every neighbor's door, called the police, shined flashlights into the sewers, and panicked. Meanwhile, I sneakily ran around the house because I knew she was in there. Eventually, I found her in my grandma's bed. She had crawled under the decorative pillows on the bed to cry and had fallen asleep. Since she was covered in pillows, she couldn't hear them call her name, and no one could tell she was buried in them. I acted like a hero until she told them why she crawled under there. Not a great night for me. I was abused by my babysitter and her kids when I was 7. One day after school, I decided not to go back to my babysitter's house because I just didn't want to deal with them anymore. I planned to wait for my mom to come home from work at the playground near my school, but that will be about 6-7 more hours more. One of my classmates' moms saw me and asked what I was doing there. I told her I was waiting for my mom. She told me to come over to her house to wait instead. I agreed and followed her home. She asked if I have any keys to my home or if I knew my mom's number. I didn't. I actually had fun there playing with my classmate, ate good food and watched TV. So about a few hours in, the babysitter's neighbors were all looking for me, and unfortunately, the house I was in was in the same apartment building and they found me. They tried to lure me out but I hid in the kitchen. They told me my mom was waiting downstairs, so I went but she wasn't there. They lied so I would come out. My mom called the babysitter to talk to me and she basically yelled at me over the phone, asking me what I was thinking running away. I eventually told her I was being abused and she stopped sending me there. My classmate's mom volunteered to babysit me and that's how I got one of the best babysitter. I guess kids don't usually tell what's happening to them until they are asked. My mom asked why I didn't tell her what's happening. I told her that I was afraid if I'm the one who will get in trouble instead because the evil babysitter was a manipulative bee. I was walking home from school one day. I was about 7 years old, really small town in Oklahoma, and I stopped outside of a house that had their sprinklers on and was running my hand through the water, just cooling off, when a man came outside and asked if I'd like to come inside for some water. I told him, no, thank you, and continued walking again. He stepped off his porch and continued to try and get me to come in, and I just walked faster and faster and never looked back. That feeling in my stomach was so awful, and I cannot imagine the feeling kids who have been abducted get once they realize something terribly wrong is happening. Just makes me sick. When I was a sophomore in high school, I got into a relationship with a senior. As nice as it was, something y'all gotta keep in mind is that it was a rebound relationship for her and my very first relationship. There was a good number of things happening in our lives that sucked, but it was mainly the fallout of her previous relationship that she decided to run away. She wanted me to go to, and if I might have, but I was a bit of a chicken and stayed last minute. When she left, everyone was wondering where she had gone. Since nobody knew about me and our relationship, I wasn't questioned, only her ex and friends. I was on good terms with her brother, but he rarely gave updates on the search. I ended up seeing her again 5 years after the fact. She said that she ended up going back to her parents' house 3 years prior, and once the shock and happiness phase was over, almost put her in house arrest. Might have to expected she came home with a friend, and that friend made sure they wouldn't do that. Her relationship with her folks is still rocky, but they are glad that she's okay and alive. I don't know much on how they are currently, but I do know that she's a different person from the one who asked me to run away with when we were teenagers. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.